Okay, everyone, we've been taking a dive into Logitech Sync. We've had some sessions where we've talked with our product manager of Logitech Sync, Trevor, about just different feature sets as well as insights, which is really kind of the key that we're sort of focusing in right now. But I'm joined by AJ today, and he's in real estate management with our company, and he's been doing a lot of work using the data that Sync has provided. But AJ, why don't you do a quick introduction first, and then we're gonna dive into Sync.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Greg. So yeah, it's AJ. I work in the workplace experience team here at Logitech, and I look a lot at how we actually use our offices and how we actually use user spaces at Logitech and how we can improve that. So we started using Sync first actually in our Lausanne office. And that was a telling story for us, kind of like how people use space, how people use their meeting spaces predominantly. In the future, we're also going to look at how people use the desk space, of course, and we're super excited about that. But it's really looking at how people use space, how people behave in space, and how is that informing our next new office project. So how is that going to inform choices that we make in a portfolio strategy in the future, if that makes sense.
So it makes perfect sense. And what we're going to do today is we're going to just give one example from the Lausanne office. We are going to have more in the future, right? Because this is an ongoing process. But
Absolutely.
we get a lot of questions to say like, okay, I understand insights. I know what it does. But my big question is, well, now how do I use it? Like, how can I practically use it and practically apply it to my organization? And we're hoping that these examples are going to be inspirational to folks on how they might use it with their own companies and their own offices. So first, what I want to do is I want to share my screen and just do a quick review, quick walkthrough of Sync. So we're familiar that Sync is the remote device management platform that we have for Logitech devices. In its simplest sense, first we can do device monitoring. We can see what rooms and what devices need updates, which ones are online or offline. And there's a host of different features. There's advanced settings, there's remote rebooting, there's scheduled rebooting, scheduled updating, etc. But really what we're focusing on today is this tab, the insights section. And this is a live tab. And when we show some examples later, AJ is going to show you the actual sync data that we're getting and pulling from the platform here. But generally speaking, what this allows us to do is we can look either at aggregate or we can even click into rooms to understand how they're being used, both when the device is on and also when the device is not being used. And this is just really helping teams like AJ's team to say, okay, well, let's just really see what's happening here. Like I've got my two eyes and I'm seeing that rooms are being used this way, but now having this data to back what I'm seeing, and then report out and say, this is why we need to make this change because this is what the data is showing us. That's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to end my share here. I'm going to go back to AJ and say, all right, before we start sharing your slides, or maybe we just start right here, tell us
Awesome.
about
Thank
sort
you.
of what your journey was with data, how you're using it. Tell us about this whole thing that happened with Lasan.
Yeah, so you have to remember, like Lausanne was one of the first projects that we did. Actually, we started the project during the pandemic. So you can imagine that during the pandemic, there's no data rolling in. But then, of course, after the pandemic, data started to roll in, and here you can really see kind of like the booking behavior, how people check in, because there's also a functionality, of course, with the schedulers on there in the room. Are people actually checking in before using a meeting room? You really discover that it's kind of like a learning journey for employees as well. That they have to check in and so forth. But what we mostly learned is that how we initially set up the project, a lot of our meeting rooms weren't right sized. Yeah. So what we really learned is that people couldn't get a meeting room, but meeting rooms were actually really underutilized. So an 8-seater was used by one person, for example. It's really that kind of stuff. So it really taught us that we probably needed more smaller meeting rooms, because most of what we learned really is that most of the meetings were 1, 2 people in a meeting room, sporadically more. If it was more, it was more kind of like a local meeting where maybe it was not so VC heavy. So and VC obviously means video collaboration for, if you, in case you didn't know. So it's that what we really learned there. And when we set off in Lausanne, a lot of these smaller meeting rooms we actually hadn't video enabled. So the pod size meeting rooms that were like for 1 to 2 person meetings were actually not video enabled, because we had the idea, oh no, it's for your local one-to-ones. But when we looked at the data, we learned that at Logitech, one-to-ones were heavy video. So a lot of one-to-ones happened in large meeting rooms. So we would still need large meeting rooms, but we better enable all our smaller meeting rooms with some sort of video collaboration solution, be it
So
doc or yeah.
So tell me about the exact data here, right? So I mean, what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing this correctly, is like a lot of people, maybe single people, double people, would use large reading rooms because they needed to have video conferencing with maybe a small team or a large team, or even just a one-on-one. And so those rooms are generally underutilized. And then you had smaller meeting rooms, which could have been right sized for those folks, which didn't have video collaboration devices in there, and so you needed to install it there. But tell me about the exact sort of data insights where you saw a piece of data, you saw a percentage, or you saw, one of our graphs, and you said, "Oh, this this is why we need to make this change." Tell me about that.
Yeah. Maybe this slide is more telling than the other slide that I just shared is. But what we were seeing in Lausanne is that no room was hitting above 30% usage in video use. But more importantly, and that's what we really learned, is that no room hit above 44% in seat usage. But while you look at it, so seat usage is low, the data showed us. Seat usage is low, but actually meeting bookings are fairly high. At least, especially from maybe more from a personal perspective. Always when you're in the office, you could never get a meeting room. Yeah.
So what I'm seeing here, just kind of looking at the dots, is it was pretty clear to see. Okay, people are booking the rooms,
Correct.
but the seat usage is under, and so therefore that data kind of helped determine. Okay, there's some wrong sizing of rooms.
Completely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then I guess the next question, right? Just because Sync has the ability to show aggregate data, but it has the ability to show like specific data for single rooms. How
Yes.
often, or kind of what was your like? Was it once you like, for example, I'm seeing two little dots here on the left where it's like they're highly underutilized. I'm seeing one big dot on the left where it's underutilized seat count and underutilized meeting usage. When you see something like that, do you say, "Oh, I need to click into that and then really understand more about this room
Yeah,
or these
Tebe,
rooms"?
you really do. You do really do, because then you want to figure out, okay, why is that? Now, very often a big one like that is because it's a meeting room that's kind of like in an area that's very specific to a certain use group, and other people don't really have access to it. So that then kind of like explains it fairly easy. But there's other ones where you think like, okay, why is that? And what do we need to do there? And that's one of the things when we saw that, when we looked at that kind of data, is underutilized from a seat perspective is really because at Logitech we're really video heavy. So a lot of our meetings are over Zoom. Maybe even meetings internal, we would use Zoom even from it like kind of like a sharing capability. So we're addicted to that kind of like high fidelity kind of video aspect of meetings. And that really drove the decision that at new office design, so the office design after Lausanne, that was Cork in Ireland, and then at a later stage San Jose in the US, that we started to equip all these meeting rooms with video equipment, but also with schedulers at the
Right.
entrance, so that actually from a distance people can actually see better, how they're used and stuff like that.
Got it. Okay, so my last question before we finish out for today is if you were to give advice in terms of how either a facilities, workspace person, or IT person would use Sync Insights, just based on what your experience has been, what would that advice be?
I think just like really dive into it and start to pluck at these things that, and start with what's big and obvious, and then I think based on that you can really start to observe what you see actually happen in reality. Start looking at the space, in real life, and maybe even ask people and employees if there's something that they're missing, because it can kind of like inform questions that you ask to your employee base, right? Because it is, because like when we saw that, but we start to ask our employees, what are you missing? And what they were missing was, it would be nice if we have an ability to do video collaboration in our pods.
Mhm.
Yeah. So all new pods that would arrive in Lausanne and other offices now will have some form of video collaboration possible. Whereas at the onset, we thought these pods are actually ideal for these small meetings, these huddle meetings that you have locally. How employees actually use them turned out differently. Everybody went in there typically for a Zoom call.
I think you have one more slide, some pictures, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's, I like to share it. This is Cork in Ireland. This is our office in Ireland. I wanted to show you because this is the next iteration of office design. Um, I just wanted to show you just because it shows that we now have video everywhere, because that's also what we do. But most importantly, the one that you see on the top right, that's the kind of size of meeting room that is now. Every meeting room that size is video, and smaller than that is now
Mm,
video. What you also see is a scheduler on the outside. One of the things that we learned by looking at this is also that we wanted to basically have schedulers everywhere, because it allows people from a distance to see whether it's taken, yes or no. They can actually, also in the application, see whether it's taken, yes or no. And the other thing it does, because that's another thing that we learned out of Insights, is that people book rooms, but people don't always show up.
mm,
Yeah. So, you know, with that, it can automatically free up and then it turns green again. So even though you may not see it available yet in your calendar, when you glance over your shoulder, you actually see, you know what, it's 5 minutes past the hour, or 5 minutes past the bottom of the hour. It's green. I'm just going to take it. And you can book it on the spot, which is awesome. People use it a lot. Actually, what we saw is that calendar bookings went down a bit and people are more spontaneous booking, rocking, especially in Lausanne, that's the case. People just rock up now to meeting rooms and just book on the spot.
very cool. So we're going to do more of this. There's going to be a lot more learnings that we're going to have, not just with meeting rooms, but now with flex desks and hot desks as well.
Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to kind of showing what, and also ourselves learning about how our users are using our hot desks and what decisions we can make there. And of course, there's going to be more discoveries about our conference rooms as well, because this is the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey. But I think the point of this series is we're really trying to showcase how folks can start to use insights what it's good for, and then really just what to click and what to view and what questions to ask. And so this is the start. Quick video just to kind of let you know there's going to be more to come. So we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg.